This graph shows a history of the United States deficit and surplus from 1961 to 2004. Since the 70s, federal spending has gone up or out of control when a Republican is in office: Ford, Reagan, Bush Sr., and Bush Jr. President Clinton, a Democrat, eliminated the debt created by Ford, Reagan, and Bush. After his 8 years in office, he left a surplus. After Bill Clinton, George Bush Jr., a Republican, created the worst deficit ever that still haunts us today. The fact that Bush was reelected shows a lack of education and lack of interest in politics in this country. In 2003, Bush claimed it was necessary to invade Iraq because there were weapons of mass destruction. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. President Bush cut taxes for the rich twice. He spent $700 billion of our tax dollars to bail out the banks, and the war he started in Iraq cost $708 billion. When President Obama took office, it was not possible to stop the war overnight. Decisions made by Bush hurt the economy long after he was president. Obama ended the war in Iraq, December 18, 2011. When Kennedy, a Democrat, was president, he handled the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the space race, and the Vietnam War while controlling the budget. While President Johnson, a Democrat, was in office, he balanced the budget while managing the Vietnam War. Plus, Johnson designed legislation that included laws to uphold civil rights, Medicare, Medicaid, aid to education, and his war on poverty. It has been a challenge for President Obama to reduce the deficit because the Republican Party controls the House of Representatives, which gives them power over the budget. In 2010, $600 billion was allocated for defense and $64 billion was spent on education. Thanks to Bush, we are in the worst recession since the Great Depression. Loss of jobs means less taxes and business profits are down, so they pay less tax. Plus, we're paying about $300 billion a year interest on the debt created by Bush. Clearly, you can't blame Obama for this mess. While Bush was in office, our tax dollars were used to build roads, stores, and schools in the Middle East, while education and other social programs in the United States endured budget cuts. We should come first. It's our money. The Republican Party wants to cut funding for education. For example, Republican Senator Scott Walker recently cut $2.6 billion from the Wisconsin education budget. Here's the result. 73% of school districts in the state reported cutting teachers this year. The 1,446 teacher position cuts represent a 75% increase over similar reductions made last year. 74% of school districts cut staff, including the largest exorbitant cuts made to reading, special education, career, and technical education teachers. The high school dropout rate in the United States in 1992 was about 10%. The high school dropout rate in the United States in 2010 was about 33%. President Obama had the right idea when he created the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, allocating $155.4 billion for education. He gets it, but the problem is common sense is not so common. If we want to win the future, if we want innovation to produce jobs in America and not overseas, then we also have to win the race to educate our kids. Without a proper education and the tools to succeed, many of our youth will end up homeless. According to the National Center on Family Homelessness in 2011, there were about 1.5 million homeless people in the United States. There has been a 12% increase in homelessness since 2007. There are 2.2 million people in prisons in the United States. This costs taxpayers $60 billion a year, $47,000 a year for each inmate. Approximately 75% of inmates are high school dropouts. 6 out of 10 inmates released from prison will end up back in prison. Cutting education to pay off the deficit will only make things worse. If we don't invest in schools now, we'll have to build more prisons later. The huge defense budget should be cut before cutting funds for education and other social services. We should give President Obama a lot of credit for taking on such a heavy burden. He inherited a record deficit, a recession, and 2 wars from President Bush. We need to elect Obama for another term because more time is required to repair the 8 years of damage by the Bush administration. The 2 wars, tax cuts for the rich, the bank bailout, etc., created a debt of $4.9 trillion during the Bush administration. Obama eliminated 1 war, and he plans to remove troops from Afghanistan in 2014. It took Bush 8 years to devastate the economy. You can't expect a radical improvement in less than 4 years. Additionally, Republicans recently set a record for the most filibusters in the Senate. These tactics prevented President Obama from getting things done. Since the 60s, every Democratic president has responsibly managed the federal budget while supporting education, Medicare, etc., even during times of war. Join us in a peaceful revolution powered by the internet. If you believe that educating our kids is the key to prosperity in this country, stop voting for Republicans and tell your friends about the video at spice.net. The Republican Party will win elections if we diversify our votes, so to keep Republicans out of office, vote for only Democratic candidates in future elections. That includes elections for senators, governors, mayors, members of Congress, etc. The key to victory is to motivate people who stop voting to get involved in future elections. Send them an email, tweet, and so on with the link to spice.net.